He was one of the most powerful men in the Nazi movement, and one of the most feared by his own comrades. Ernst Röhm built the SA into a mass force that dominated the streets and helped carry the Nazis to power. But once the regime was in control, his influence collided with other leaders who wanted stability, hierarchy, and their own share of power. What began as rivalry inside the Nazi leadership between paramilitary chiefs, police bosses, and party elites became a struggle for control of the new state. This is how that rivalry spiraled into a purge, and how Ernst Röhm became its most prominent victim.
Röhm was being given a position that intruded upon the ambitions and advancement of those two individuals. Röhm is dangerous to the interests of both men.
Ernst Julius Günther Röhm was born on November 28, 1887, in Munich, in the Kingdom of Bavaria. The son of a railway official, he grew up in a conservative nationalist household that valued discipline, order, and loyalty to the state. From an early age, Röhm showed a fascination with the military. He was not academically distinguished, but he was deeply attracted to the life of a soldier. In 1906, at the age of 18, Röhm joined the Bavarian army as an officer cadet. He was commissioned as a lieutenant in 1908 and quickly embraced the rigid culture of the officer corps. Röhm was not charismatic in appearance. He was short, stocky, and later scarred. But he projected toughness and directness. The army gave him identity, status, and purpose. When World War I broke out in 1914, Röhm served on the Western Front. He was wounded several times, including serious facial injuries from shrapnel that left him permanently scarred. By the end of the war, he had risen to the rank of captain and earned both classes of the Iron Cross. Like many frontline officers, Röhm emerged from the conflict hardened, embittered, and deeply hostile to the new democratic Weimar Republic that followed Germany's defeat. To Röhm and many of his generation, the war had not been lost on the battlefield, but betrayed at home. The armistice, the Treaty of Versailles, and the collapse of the monarchy convinced him that Germany had been humiliated and needed to be restored through force. Germany was flooded with unemployed soldiers who could not return to civilian life. Röhm joined the Freikorps, right-wing paramilitary units that fought communist uprisings and defended conservative order in the chaotic post-war years. Röhm became involved in violent actions against leftist movements in Bavaria, including the suppression of the Bavarian Soviet Republic in 1919. These campaigns reinforced his belief that political power came from armed force, not parliamentary debate. During this period, Röhm began building a network of contacts among soldiers, nationalists, and radical right-wing activists. He also became associated with a small political movement that would soon reshape German history: Adolf Hitler's National Socialist German Workers' Party. Röhm met Hitler around 1919 to 1920. At the time, Hitler was an obscure agitator with a talent for speeches, while Röhm already had military experience and contacts. Röhm saw in Hitler a political figure who could give direction to the violent nationalism he embraced. Hitler, in turn, recognized Röhm as a man who could bring fighters and discipline to the movement. In the early 1920s, Röhm played a central role in shaping the Sturmabteilung, or SA, the Nazi Party's paramilitary wing. Originally intended to protect party meetings and disrupt opponents, the SA soon became a force for street violence against communists, social democrats, and other enemies of the Nazis. Röhm helped recruit former soldiers and Freikorps men into its ranks. He believed the party needed a strong fighting organization to seize power and dominate the streets. The SA quickly gained a reputation for brutality, intimidation, and brawling. In November 1923, Röhm took part in the Beer Hall Putsch, Hitler's failed attempt to overthrow the Bavarian government in Munich. Röhm led armed SA men who seized a local military headquarters, hoping to spark a wider uprising. The putsch collapsed within a day. Hitler was arrested and later imprisoned. Röhm was also arrested but eventually acquitted. The failure did not end Röhm's commitment, but it marked a temporary setback. With the Nazi Party banned, Röhm drifted away for a time, pursuing other paramilitary ventures and maintaining his network among right-wing militants.
The arrival of Röhm restores a relationship which he'd had before 1923 Himmler really thinks that there's a chance of collaborating with Röhm. Maybe this will help to strengthen his position in the party, which at the moment is still quite weak.
In the late 1920s, Röhm spent time abroad, including 2 years in Bolivia, where he served as a military advisor to the Bolivian army. The work suited his temperament, but Germany remained his true focus. By 1930, the Nazi Party was rising rapidly through elections. Hitler needed experienced organizers to rebuild and expand the SA, which had grown disorderly and factionalized. In January 1931, Hitler summoned Röhm back to Germany and appointed him Chief of Staff of the SA. This was a turning point. Röhm returned with a clear vision. The SA should not just serve as a party militia, but become the core of a new revolutionary army that would replace the old elites and reshape Germany. Under Röhm's leadership, the SA expanded dramatically. From roughly 100,000 men in 1931, it grew to around 2 to 3 million members by 1934. The brown-shirted stormtroopers filled streets, rallies and beer halls across Germany. They clashed constantly with communist fighters and intimidated political opponents. To many unemployed young men, the SA offered uniforms and identity, a sense of belonging, meals, shelter and purpose, and the promise of action in a stagnant society. Röhm encouraged this image of the SA as a brotherhood of fighters. He tolerated indiscipline and rough behavior if it meant loyalty and energy. Unlike many conservative elites who supported Hitler to stabilize Germany, Röhm saw Nazism as a revolutionary movement. He believed that once the Nazis came to power, Germany should undergo a second revolution that would sweep away old institutions. Röhm's goals included breaking the power of traditional elites, absorbing or replace the professional army with a people's militia based on the SA, creating a more radical nationalist state that rewarded Nazi fighters. Röhm openly criticized big business aristocrats and conservative politicians who had allied with Hitler. He expected the SA to be rewarded for its sacrifices with real power. This put him on a collision course with the Reichswehr, Germany's regular army, which was limited by the Treaty of Versailles to 100,000 men but still fiercely protective of its independence and prestige. Röhm wanted the SA, millions strong, to absorb or replace it. Army leaders viewed this as an existential threat. Röhm was unusual within the Nazi leadership for another reason. He was openly homosexual. In a party that preached racial purity and traditional values, this was widely known but largely ignored in his case. Hitler was aware of Röhm's sexuality but defended him, arguing that what mattered was loyalty and service to the movement. Röhm's status as an early comrade and proven organizer shielded him for years. However, rivals such as Heinrich Himmler and Reinhard Heydrich quietly kept dossiers on Röhm and his associates, ready to use them if needed. His private life would later become a convenient weapon. When Hitler was appointed Chancellor on January 30th, 1933, the SA believed their moment had come. They had fought in the streets, suffered arrests, and faced down communists. Now their leader ruled Germany. But reality was more complicated. The Nazis depended on the cooperation of conservative politicians, big business, the army, and President Paul von Hindenburg. These groups feared chaos and revolution. Hitler assured them that order would be maintained. The SA, however, did not stand down. Throughout 1933, SA men took over local offices, arrested enemies, set up improvised detention camps, and continued street violence. Röhm encouraged this activism. He saw the SA as the engine of ongoing revolution. But for conservatives and army leaders, the SA looked increasingly like a threat to stability. By mid-1933, the SA's numbers dwarfed the army. Röhm spoke openly of absorbing or replacing the Reichswehr into a new SA-based force, with himself as its commander. This alarmed the generals. Hitler owed much of his rise to the SA, but now their ambitions endangered his broader strategy. He needed the army's support for rearmament and future wars. He also wanted the loyalty of conservative elites to consolidate power. Throughout late 1933 and early 1934, pressure mounted on Hitler from army leaders who demanded action against Röhm, President Hindenburg, who hinted he might declare martial law. Himmler and Göring, who sought to weaken a rival power base, Hitler tried to calm the situation. He reassured Röhm personally while also promising the generals that the SA would be restrained. Röhm, however, refused to back down. In February 1934, on Hitler's orders, Röhm and other SA leaders were sent on leave, but Röhm continued to press for the second revolution, sending memoranda calling for the SA to become the basis of a new army. To Hitler, this was no longer just radical talk, it was a challenge. By the spring of 1934, Röhm stood increasingly isolated. The army despised him, business leaders feared him, conservatives resented him. The SS, under Himmler and Reinhard Heydrich, along with Göring, saw him as a rival. Heydrich's intelligence service compiled reports accusing Röhm and his circle of plotting against Hitler, claims exaggerated or fabricated, but politically useful. At the same time, Röhm's open homosexuality was now being whispered more loudly, reframed as moral corruption within the SA leadership. Hitler was torn. Röhm was an old comrade, one of the few who had called him Du in the early days. But Röhm had become politically dangerous. By June 1934, Hitler made his decision. At the end of June, Röhm and senior SA leaders were summoned to a meeting at a resort in Bad WWII in Bavaria. They believed it would be a discussion to ease tensions and clarify the SA's future. They did not know that Hitler had already authorized a purge. The SS and Gestapo prepared arrest lists, and SS units were placed on alert across Germany. Army leaders signalled that they would support decisive action against Röhm. What followed would become known as the Night of the Long Knives, the violent purge that destroyed the SA leadership, eliminated conservative enemies, and secured Hitler's dictatorship. Ernst Röhm, once the builder of the Nazi movement's fighting force, was about to become its most prominent casualty. By the summer of 1934, Ernst Röhm stood at the height of his power and at the edge of ruin. As Chief of Staff of the SA, he commanded a force of more than 2 million men. They marched through Germany's cities in brown uniforms, symbols of the street battles that had helped bring the Nazis to power. Röhm believed the SA represented the revolutionary heart of National Socialism. Without them, he argued, Hitler would never have become Chancellor. But the Germany of 1934 was no longer the chaotic battleground of the Weimar years. Hitler now ruled a state, not just a movement. To secure his position, he needed the support of the traditional elites, the army, the civil service, industrial leaders, and President Paul von Hindenburg, and all of them feared the SA. To conservative Germans, the SA embodied disorder. Many members were often unemployed, poorly disciplined, and prone to violence. Throughout 1933, they had carried out arrests, humiliated officials, and established makeshift detention camps. Röhm tolerated and often encouraged this behaviour. He believed revolution was unfinished. Röhm's greatest challenge was directed at the Reichswehr, Germany's regular army. Limited by the Treaty of Versailles to 100,000 men, the army leadership saw itself as the sole legitimate bearer of military power in the state. Röhm wanted the SA to absorb the army and become the foundation of a new People's Army, with himself at its head. This was unacceptable to the generals. Men like Werner von Blomberg warned Hitler that the army would not tolerate Röhm's ambitions. Without the army's loyalty, Hitler could not rearm Germany or pursue his foreign policy goals. The choice was becoming stark: Röhm or the Reichswehr. President Hindenburg, aging and increasingly frail, was another source of pressure. By early 1934, he and his conservative advisers had grown alarmed by the continued lawlessness of the SA. There were hints that if order was not restored, Hindenburg might place authority temporarily in the hands of the army. At the same time, Röhm's enemies within the Nazi leadership were moving against him. Heinrich Himmler, head of the SS, and Reinhard Heydrich, chief of the SD intelligence service, viewed the SA as both an ideological embarrassment and a rival power base. They compiled dossiers on Röhm and his closest associates, focusing on alleged plots and Röhm's homosexuality, well known, but now portrayed as a sign of moral corruption and political unreliability. Hermann Göring, meanwhile, resented Röhm's influence and wanted to protect his own position as Prussian interior minister and head of the Gestapo in that state. Together, these men encouraged Hitler to act. They presented him with intelligence reports, possibly exaggerated and fabricated at times, claiming that Röhm was preparing a coup against the government or Hitler's leadership. There is no solid evidence that Röhm was actually plotting to overthrow Hitler, but he was clearly challenging the existing power structure. For Hitler, that was enough. Hitler's relationship with Röhm was personal as well as political. Röhm had been one of his earliest supporters, a man who had brought fighters to the movement when it was still fragile. Unlike most subordinates, Röhm addressed Hitler informally and saw himself as a comrade, not a servant. For years, Hitler defended Röhm against criticism. He dismissed concerns about his sexuality and brushed off complaints about SA violence. But by mid-1934, Röhm had become a liability Hitler could no longer afford. In June, Hitler met with army leaders and assured them that he would deal with the SA problem. Shortly afterward, he ordered Röhm and the top SA leadership to attend a meeting at a spa resort in Bad WWII on Lake Tegernsee in Bavaria, supposedly to discuss the future of the SA. Röhm believed it would be a chance to clear the air. He arrived on June 29, 1934, relaxed and confident, accompanied by several senior SA officers. He did not know that Hitler had already decided on a purge. In the early hours of June 30th, Hitler flew from Berlin to Munich and drove to Bad WWII with a small armed escort of SS men. Shortly after dawn, Hitler and his men burst into the hotel where Röhm and his colleagues were staying. Röhm was found in his room, still in bed. According to witnesses, Hitler angrily accused him of treason and betrayal. Röhm was stunned. He protested his loyalty, insisting that he had done nothing against Hitler. It made no difference. Röhm and other SA leaders were arrested on the spot. They were taken under guard to Stadelheim prison in Munich. Across Germany, similar scenes were unfolding. SS units and police, including Göring's Gestapo in Prussia, arrested SA leaders in city after city. Using the opportunity, Hitler also moved against conservative enemies and personal rivals. Gregor Strasser, a former Nazi leader who had fallen out with Hitler. Kurt von Schleicher, former Chancellor. Other political figures viewed as potential threats. Many were shot without trial. The operation, later called the Night of the Long Knives, quickly became a broader political purge. At Stadelheim prison, Röhm was placed in a cell and held in isolation. For more than a day, his fate remained uncertain. Himmler, supported by Göring, pushed for execution. Some within the regime still hesitated. Röhm was, after all, a founding figure of the movement. Killing him outright could shock the party faithful. Hitler himself appears to have wavered. He wanted Röhm removed, but may have hoped he could be forced into resignation and exile. Himmler and Göring, however, argued that Röhm was too dangerous to be left alive. Eventually, Hitler gave the order. On July 1st, 1934, two SS officers, Theodor Eicke, Commandant of Dachau, and Michael Lippert, were sent to Stadelheim with instructions to carry out the sentence. The exact details of Röhm's final moments are known only through later accounts, but the outline is clear. Eicke and Lippert entered Röhm's cell and placed a pistol on the table. They told him he had been condemned and gave him the chance to commit suicide. Röhm refused. According to accounts, he declared that if he was to die, Hitler should do it himself. After a short wait, the two SS men returned and shot Röhm at close range. It was July 1st, 1934. Ernst Röhm was 46 years old. His body was later cremated and his death announced as the punishment of a traitor. Over the course of June 30th to July 2nd, 1934, roughly 80 to 90 people were officially acknowledged as killed. Modern historians estimate the true number may have been 150 to 200 or more, including SA leaders, conservative politicians, and former rivals within the Nazi Party. Many were executed without any form of legal process. The SA was decapitated, its senior leadership was wiped out, and the organization reduced to political irrelevance. On July 13th, 1934, Hitler addressed the Reichstag to justify the killings. He claimed that Röhm and his associates had been plotting a coup and that he had acted as the supreme judge of the German people to save the nation from chaos. No evidence was presented, no trials were held. Days earlier, Hitler's cabinet had issued a law retroactively legalizing the killings as acts of state self-defense. The Reichstag now offered its unanimous approval. Germany's rule of law had been openly abandoned. After the purge, the SA was reduced to a shadow of its former self. It continued to exist, but its political influence was broken. Leadership passed to Victor Lutze, a loyal but far less powerful figure. The SA's role was now limited to training and ceremonial functions. The real winners were the Reichswehr, which secured its independence and later swore a personal oath of loyalty to Hitler after Hindenburg's death in August 1934, and the SS, which emerged as an elite organization directly under Himmler and loyal to Hitler. The SS would soon, through its control of police and security forces, become the central instrument of terror in Nazi Germany. Röhm's fall marked the end of the Nazi revolutionary phase. He had imagined National Socialism as a movement that would overturn Germany's old elites and create a new order led by radical fighters like himself. Hitler chose a different path, alliance with the army, industry, and conservative institutions to build a powerful state. Röhm had helped bring Hitler to power, but once power was secured, Röhm became expendable. The Night of the Long Knives was more than a purge of the SA. It was a turning point in Nazi Germany. It showed that Hitler would use murder to eliminate rivals, that no one, not even old comrades, was safe, and that the state now served the will of one man. After July 1934, opposition within Germany became extraordinarily difficult and dangerous. The army was bound to Hitler. The SS was empowered. The rule of law was gone. And Ernst Röhm, once the strongman of the Nazi streets, was dead. Röhm's life traced the violent path of German radical nationalism after World War I. From decorated officer to Freikorps fighter. From organizer of street violence to leader of a mass paramilitary army. From Hitler's indispensable ally to his most dangerous liability. He believed he was building a revolution. In the end, he became a victim of the dictatorship he helped create. The Night of the Long Knives ended Röhm's story, and marked the moment when Adolf Hitler proved that in the Third Reich, no loyalty could protect you when power was at stake.